My name is Victoria Chen, and I learned at 26 that you can spend your entire life being invisible in your own family. The Fairmont Grand Hotel Ballroom in San Francisco was filled with 400 guests celebrating my father's 60th birthday and the announcement of his succession plan for Chen Capital Partners, the private equity firm he'd built over 30 years into a $2.3 billion portfolio. I stood near the champagne fountain in a black cocktail dress I'd bought specifically for tonight, watching my younger sister, Melissa, work the room in her custom Valentino gown. She had that practiced smile, the one our mother had coached into her since she was 12. Every handshake looked natural, every laugh sounded genuine. She was 23 and had been groomed for this moment since college. Victoria! My father's voice cut through the ambient noise. Thomas Chen didn't need to raise his voice to command attention. You're here. Not, I'm glad you're here, or thank you for coming, just acknowledgement of my physical presence, the way you'd note a piece of furniture. Of course, Dad, wouldn't miss it. His eyes swept over me once, a quick audit that found me wanting in ways he'd never specify. Melissa's about to give her speech. Your mother wants family photos after the announcement. He walked away before I could respond. That was our relationship distilled into 30 seconds. His expectations delivered as statements, my role reduced to compliance. The lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage where Melissa stood behind the podium, radiant and confident. My mother, Patricia, dabbed her eyes preemptively. Thank you all for being here tonight, Melissa began, her voice carrying perfectly across the ballroom. Tonight isn't just about celebrating my father's incredible legacy, it's about the future of Chen Capital Partners. She paused for effect. Dad has named me as his successor. At the end of this year, I'll assume the position of managing partner. The applause erupted. I watched my father beam with pride as he joined her on stage. They embraced while cameras flashed. Bloomberg reporters in the crowd were already typing on their phones. This would be news. The young heiress taking control of a major Bay Area investment firm. My phone buzzed in my clutch. A text from my mother. Family photos, stage left entrance, now. I made my way through the crowd. Behind the stage curtain, my parents and Melissa stood together while a photographer adjusted his lighting. My father saw me, and something flickered across his face. Not pleasure, calculation. Victoria, stand on the end, my mother directed, positioning me at the frame's edge while keeping Melissa center stage between her and my father. This is for the Wall Street Journal profile. Actually, my father said, Stephen, let's do some with just Patricia, Melissa, and me first. These are for the primary feature. I felt my stomach tighten, but I kept my face neutral. Sure, I'll wait. 20 minutes later, they'd finished their shots. The photographer was packing up. What about the family photos? I asked. My mother adjusted Melissa's hair. We got them, sweetheart. The editorial team wanted to focus on the succession story, you understand. I understood perfectly. I'd understood my entire life. Melissa was the chosen one. First in academics when she got into Stanford, I'd gone to Berkeley. First in achievement when she joined Chen Capital straight out of business school, I'd gone my own way. First in their hearts every single day. Congratulations, Melissa. And I meant it. This wasn't her fault. You'll do great. She looked at me with something almost like sympathy. Thanks, Vic. That means a lot. As the party continued, I received a text from my father's assistant. Board dinner tomorrow, 7 p.m., Boulevard Restaurant. Family presence required for investor introductions. Required, never invited. I confirmed and ordered my own car home. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that for the past 4 years, I'd been building something they couldn't see because they'd never looked closely enough to notice. While Melissa was learning the family business, I'd been creating my own. Boulevard Restaurant occupied a premier location on the Embarcadero, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Bay Bridge. I arrived exactly at 7, wearing a charcoal gray suit that cost more than my father would guess. I'd learned early that dressing well wasn't about impressing my family, it was about respecting myself. The private dining room was already full. 20 people seated around an elongated table, my parents, Melissa, and 17 of Chen Capital's most significant limited partners, the institutional investors and family offices that provided the capital my father deployed. Combined, they represented approximately $1.8 billion in committed funds. Victoria, my father stood. Everyone, my eldest daughter. She's in, what is it you do again? In consulting, I said simply, taking the only empty seat at the table's far end, naturally positioned away from the power center where Melissa sat at my father's right hand. How nice, said Margaret Rothstein, whose family office had been invested with Chen Capital for 15 years. The tech sector has been quite robust. It has, I agreed. My father launched into his presentation. Melissa had prepared slides showcasing Chen Capital's portfolio performance, their new investment thesis, and her vision for the firm's future. She was good, articulate, strategic, confident. I felt a genuine moment of pride watching her command the room. With Melissa's leadership, my father continued, we're positioned to raise our next fund at $500 million, our largest ever. This represents an extraordinary opportunity for our existing partners to increase their allocations. The door opened. My father's assistant entered, looking flustered, followed by someone I'd been expecting, David Blackwell, managing director of Sentinel Ventures, one of the largest venture capital firms in Silicon Valley, with over $12 billion in assets under management. He was 54, Harvard MBA, legendary for discovering 3 companies that became unicorns before the term was mainstream. My apologies for the interruption, Thomas. I'm here for the Chen Capital dinner, but I was told there might be some confusion about the invitation list. My father looked genuinely puzzled. David, welcome, but I think there's been a miscommunication. This is a dinner for our limited partners. Sentinel isn't invested in Chen Capital. No, David agreed, walking past my father toward where I sat. But I am investing in something far more interesting. He extended his hand to me. I stood, shaking it professionally. Victoria, good to see you again. The table went silent. My mother's fork stopped halfway to her mouth. Mr. Blackwell, I replied, thank you for making time tonight. My father's face had shifted from confusion to something harder. You two know each other? Know each other? David laughed. Thomas, I've been trying to convince your daughter to take my money for 2 years. She's one of the most disciplined founders I've encountered in 25 years of investing. Founder? Melissa's voice was quiet. David turned to address the table. You don't know? Victoria is the founder and CEO of Meridian Analytics. We're currently finalizing a Series C funding round that values her company at $340 million. The silence became absolute. That's impossible, my mother said. Victoria works in consulting. I do consult, I said calmly. I consult with Fortune 500 companies who pay Meridian Analytics between $800,000 and $2.4 million annually for our proprietary AI-driven risk assessment platform. We have 43 enterprise clients. Last year, we generated $47 million in revenue with 64% margins. David pulled out his phone, opening an email. I sent the final term sheet this afternoon, $85 million in new funding at a $340 million post-money valuation. Sentinel is leading. Victoria will retain 51% equity ownership, making her personal stake worth approximately $173 million. He set his phone on the table, turning it so my father could see the document header. Binding term sheet, Meridian Analytics, Inc. But my father was struggling, actually struggling to process this. How long has this been? 4 years, I said calmly. I incorporated Meridian Analytics 6 months after graduating from Berkeley. We were bootstrapped for the first 2 years, then raised a $3 million seed round, then a $15 million Series A, then a $35 million Series B. Tomorrow morning, we're announcing our Series C with a press release that TechCrunch will publish at 6 a.m. Margaret Rothstein leaned forward. The Meridian Analytics that just landed the contract with J.P. Morgan? And Goldman Sachs, I confirmed. Those were announced last quarter.
This quarter, we're onboarding Citigroup and Bank of America. The financial services sector is particularly interested in our fraud detection algorithms. My father looked at me like he'd never seen me before. Perhaps he hadn't. David addressed the room again. I came tonight because Victoria mentioned this was an important family dinner. I wanted to personally extend an invitation to your family. Thomas, Meridian's growth trajectory is exceptional. If Chen Capital is interested in co-investing in our Series C, I can make allocations available. Though frankly, given Victoria's relationship to your family, I'm surprised you weren't involved in earlier rounds. The implication hung in the air like smoke.
My father recovered his composure, but I could see the calculations running behind his eyes. Victoria, this is extraordinary. Why didn't you tell us? I did tell you, I said evenly, multiple times. 3 years ago at Thanksgiving, I mentioned I'd started a company. You said entrepreneurship was admirable but risky and that I should focus on stable employment. 2 years ago at Christmas, I mentioned we'd secured our first major clients. You changed the subject to Melissa's promotion. Last year, at your anniversary party, I said we'd raised institutional funding. You asked if I'd considered getting my MBA. The table was watching this like a tennis match. My mother tried to smile. Sweetheart, we've always supported your choices. You've tolerated them, I corrected. There's a difference. But that's fine. I didn't build Meridian for your approval. I built it because I'm good at something you never bothered to notice. Melissa spoke carefully. Vic, this is incredible. Really, congratulations. She meant it. Whatever else was true, my sister wasn't cruel, just privileged. David checked his watch. Victoria, we have that call with the journal reporter in 30 minutes to discuss tomorrow's announcement. We should prepare. He addressed my father. Thomas, if Chen Capital wants to discuss investment opportunities, have your team contact mine, though I'll note that our allocation window closes Friday. Wait, my father said. He looked at the limited partners around the table, several of whom were now studying me with obvious interest. Victoria, perhaps we could talk about coordination, family synergies. Chen Capital could provide strategic value. Could it? I asked, because from where I'm sitting, Chen Capital is positioned in late-stage buyouts and traditional private equity. Meridian is a high-growth SaaS company in an emerging AI sector. I'm not sure what strategic value you'd provide beyond capital, and I have multiple term sheets offering capital. Margaret Rothstein spoke up. Victoria, the Rothstein office would be very interested in discussing investment opportunities in Meridian. David, would you be open to additional qualified investors? With Victoria's approval, David said, looking at me. The power had shifted so completely that I could feel my father realizing it in real time. His limited partners, the people whose capital made Chen Capital possible, were now looking past him toward me. Actually, I said, there is one area where coordination might make sense. I pulled out my own phone, opening a document I'd prepared weeks ago in anticipation of this exact moment. Chen Capital's upcoming fundraise. Dad, you mentioned targeting $500 million. That's correct. Several of your limited partners are also prospects for Meridian's growth equity round in 18 months, when we'll likely raise a Series D. It would be unfortunate if there were competition for commitments. I looked directly at Margaret Rothstein, at David Park from Park Family Office, at 3 other investors at the table, unless we could find an arrangement that benefits everyone. My father's jaw tightened. What kind of arrangement? Meridian will need board advisors from the traditional finance sector as we expand into banking and insurance. Chen Capital's network could be valuable. In exchange, I'd be willing to help coordinate with institutional investors to ensure no conflicts between your fundraising timeline and mine. It was a beautifully constructed trap. I was offering to help him, which meant I had the power to hurt him, and everyone at this table understood the implication. Cross-sector investors had choices where to deploy capital. A rising star tech CEO's recommendation carried weight. That's generous, my father said carefully.
It's practical, I corrected. I don't need Chen Capital's money, Dad. I have Sentinel, but I could use your network, and you could use my goodwill with investors who are suddenly very interested in my company. So here's what I'm proposing. You add me to Chen Capital's advisory board, formal role, proper equity compensation, quarterly meetings. In exchange, I'll provide introductions to my institutional relationships and coordinate fundraising timelines. The terms were clear. I would have an official position in his firm, the firm that had just announced Melissa as successor without mentioning me at all, and he would publicly acknowledge my value. My mother started to object, but my father raised his hand to stop her. That's acceptable, he said. We can formalize the arrangement next week. Tomorrow, I said. Your counsel can draft the advisory board agreement tomorrow. I'll have my attorney review it. We'll execute by Friday before David's allocation window closes and before TechCrunch publishes the Meridian announcement. That way, when reporters ask about the Chen Capital connection, we'll have a clean answer. David was smiling now, clearly enjoying this. Victoria, you really are a hell of a negotiator. I stood, smoothing my suit jacket. If we're finished here, David and I have that call. Dad, I'll have my assistant coordinate with yours tomorrow on the agreement. I looked at Melissa. Congratulations again on your new role. You've earned it. I meant that too, but the difference was that she'd earned something that was given to her. I'd earned something I'd built from nothing. As David and I walked out, I heard my father say something to my mother in Mandarin. He always switched languages when he was rattled. I didn't need to hear it clearly. I knew what he was realizing. His eldest daughter had just become more valuable to his business than his chosen successor, and unlike Melissa's position, which he'd granted, mine was something he couldn't take away. The TechCrunch article published at 6:03 a.m. Pacific Time with the headline, Meridian Analytics raises $85 million Series C, reaches $340 million valuation in competitive round. By 9 a.m., I'd received 47 LinkedIn messages, 12 interview requests, and 6 congratulatory texts from Chen Capital's limited partners. My father's text arrived at 9:17 a.m., Advisory board agreement ready for review. Can you come to the office this afternoon? I arrived at Chen Capital's offices in the financial district at 2 p.m. The reception area had changed since I'd been here last, more modern with Melissa's design influence visible in the minimalist aesthetic. The receptionist looked up with new recognition in her eyes. Miss Chen, your father is expecting you. Conference room A. Inside, I found my father, my mother, Melissa, and Chen Capital's general counsel, Robert Kim. The agreement was already printed, sitting in the center of the table. Victoria, my father said. He looked tired. Thank you for coming. I sat down, taking the document. Robert walked me through it. Advisory board position, quarterly compensation of $25,000, equity grant of 0.3% of Chen Capital GP stakes, standard confidentiality and non-compete clauses scoped appropriately. It was fair, more than fair. It was an acknowledgement. I will sign this, I said. My mother spoke carefully. Victoria, we want you to know that we're proud of what you've accomplished. We always have been. I set down the pen. Mom, I appreciate the sentiment, but let's be honest with each other. You didn't know what I'd accomplished because you never asked. For 4 years, I was building something significant, and you assumed I was fumbling around in consulting jobs. That's not support. That's indifference. That's not fair, my father said. We've always... Dad, I kept my voice level. I'm not angry, I'm truly not, but I need you to understand something. I didn't build Meridian to prove anything to you. I built it because I'm good at what I do, and I wanted to create something meaningful. The fact that you're only seeing that now because a legendary VC showed up at your dinner and put a $340 million valuation in front of you tells me everything about how you've seen me. Melissa looked uncomfortable. Vic, I never meant to... You didn't do anything wrong, I told her honestly. You were handed opportunities and you took them. I respect that, but I need all of you to understand that my relationship with this family going forward is different now. I have leverage, I have independence, and I won't tolerate being invisible anymore. My father was quiet for a long moment. Then, "What do you want from us?" "Recognition," I said simply. "When Chen Capital does press, I want to be included in family photos. When you host investor events, I want to be introduced properly, not as an afterthought. When business opportunities arise where my expertise is relevant, I want to be consulted. And most importantly, I want you to understand that Meridian's success is mine. It's not a happy accident or lucky timing. It's the result of strategic planning, disciplined execution, and capabilities you never bothered to see." My mother was crying now, quiet tears that she didn't try to hide. "We failed you," she whispered. "As parents, we failed you." "You didn't fail me," I said. "You underestimated me, but I don't need you to carry guilt about it. I need you to do better going forward." I signed the advisory board agreement. Robert witnessed it, and it was done. My father stood up, extending his hand formally across the table. I shook it. "Welcome to the advisory board," he said. Then, quieter, "Welcome to being seen." That evening, I met David Blackwell for dinner at Quince to celebrate the funding announcement. The Wall Street Journal had picked up the story, and my phone hadn't stopped buzzing all day. "How does it feel?" David asked, raising his wine glass. "Surreal," I admitted. 4 years of work validated in one term sheet. "Not just validated, recognized," he corrected. "You built something extraordinary, Victoria. With or without your family's acknowledgement, Meridian would still be worth $340 million. Their recognition doesn't change your company's value. It just changes your relationship with them." "Is that enough?" I asked. "Only you can answer that."